These interviews are geared to better understand how the government is operating and better educating the citizenry as to what the government has planned for them, and with a level of openness and transparency to explain some of the issues, views shared by others out there in the country and in the diaspora, just for clarity. Dr. Jagdeo, thank you for this opportunity once again. And getting straight into it as people would expect of us. There is much to be said on the ground about a number of different things that we will cover this afternoon.
Sure.
But I want to go head on into the Amelia Falls project.
Okay, so what in particular would you like to hear about Amelia's?
The Amelia Falls project has been one that has been set up in the past by the PPP to alleviate energy woes in Guyana. That was brought down in the past, again, by the previous government, who is now in opposition. We see that a number of projects have been held back by now opposition, and we see the loss of benefit to Guyanese.
Sure.
Like,
I get the drift.
Fortunately, Marriott went through, and we see the good use of Marriott now.
So
once again, an attempt is being made to bring down the Marriott. Suggestions are being made that Chinese companies are getting all of these projects, the Amelia Falls likewise. So
Sure.
Please explain, what is the government's position on that, and why is it still viable for Guyanese?
So we believe in total transparency surrounding this project. We have had maybe 10,000 pages of extensive studies done on this project. The hydrology risks, the economic model, the environmental impact, design standards, and these were all led by one of the biggest companies in the world, the Blackstone, a subsidiary of the Blackstone Group, which, and you know, Blackstone is a major American company. That company, after doing all of these studies, committed to building the project and selling power to the government of Guyana. There was a lot of discussions in the public domain by the newspapers, particularly Kaichou News, and then the opposition, claiming that the project was not good for Guyana. They argued that the project would entail borrowing $2 billion US dollars, including when people like Clive Thomas and others, $2 billion US dollars. The fact of the matter is that it was zero debt. There was a contingent liability where we had to guarantee paying for the power, but no debt on the project itself. That was a lie number one. Lie number two was that the cost of power will increase. The fact of the matter is that we are selling power at 30 US cents per kilowatt hour, close to maybe 60 Guyana dollars per kilowatt hour. We were going to buy power at that time from the Blackstone or the Site Global at about 10 cents per kilowatt hour, 1/3 of the price that we were selling power at to the people of this country, that is GPL selling power to. The fact that we could have sold the power at 15 cents per kilowatt hour and cut the price by 50% had that project gone through. That was line number two. If you read the newspapers, you will see it, Kaichou News and the others. Three, that there would be a hydrology risk, that we'd have drought or the river will run dry and we wouldn't, the project will be stranded. That is why they're building a massive reservoir. So you store water in the reservoir. So when we have like a dry season, or so when the volume of water doesn't come, you have enough water in the reservoir to continue generating power. And that is why the model, the financial model and the feasibility study was done only on the 72% use of the capacity of the power plant. So it catered for periods of like with less rainfall, etc. Now, clearly this is a risk anywhere in the world. If rain stopped falling for 5 years in the future, you wouldn't have any power. But the hydrology risk was built into the model. Now, notwithstanding all of that, APNU voted to kill the project, although this was a great project for the country. And we supplied on a flash drive, we tabled all of the studies, we gave it to APNU, we put it in the parliament, total transparency. When the government came into office, they asked the Norwegians to fund a study about Amelia Falls. And the study that the Norwegians did showed that Amelia Falls is the best way of moving forward. I'm just giving you the history because we have had a long history. So we made it clear in opposition that we're returning to this project. You cannot have, there is no other big source of renewable energy. Everyone wants, all these NGOs in Guyana say we mustn't develop gas, we mustn't use fossil fuel, you have to have renewable energy. Well, this is the biggest renewable energy project in the country, the biggest renewable energy project. No other bigger project than this. But apart from that, we went out to tender recently, and the price came in not at 10 cents anymore per kilowatt hour, just over 10 cents, as was the case with Site Global, but now at 7.7 cents per kilowatt hour. And the good thing is that we don't have to take equity, find $100 million of equity, unlike when the Site Global was developing the proposal. So right now, this is on favorable terms. It was a public tender. You had companies, including Brazilian companies, that bid for this. The Chinese company won the bid. So that's where we are now moving forward. But again, we start, the hydrology risk. I see some people, Kaichou News, talking about hydrology risk. And I'd urge people, yesterday I asked Ashni Singh to put a press release out. Read the press release and you will see the details on the hydrology risk. Now, clearly these naysayers, they will never do anything to develop a major project. I see Christopher Ram, the same person who was questioning the Marriott project that you see liming around the Marriott conveniently now. He's a specialist on the hydro now again. And you know what this all came? None of them were talking about the hydrology risk, but at the energy conference, which by the way, we did not arrange. It was privately arranged and the APNU and the others wanted a free ticket. We couldn't supply the ticket. It's a privately arranged energy conference. The government contributed in terms of attendance and participation because we wanted to project a bigger image of Guyana and to bring more opportunities here, start highlighting our policy initiatives. But APNU been criticizing us for not inviting them to the conference. It's not funded by us. But at that conference, Brassington gave a detailed presentation and he mentioned the hydrology risk. We're not in the business of hiding things from our people. And it's something that we have to accommodate. So now suddenly, this is a big problem, again, with that project. This project is vital for Guyana. It's part of the energy mix of the future. 250 megawatts coming from the gas power plant, about 35 megawatts through solar, 165 from the hydro. These would all allow us combined to cut our emission level by 70% and yet reduce electricity price to our people and the business by 50%. That's half of what they're paying now. That is what we're working on. We don't have to take, there is no loan for this project. There is no commitment except that to buy power from the company that is developing the project. Now, talking about other Chinese projects, the bridge was tendered to. We had companies that are non-Chinese companies. Any company could have tendered for the project. We have not, but people ask me about Chinese projects and stuff. Since the PPP government came into office, we did not take a 1 cent of debt. We have not contracted a single loan from the Chinese government. Although floated out there, you hear, $1.5 billion of loan. We took a big loan from China. It's not true. It's absolutely not true. And I'm saying this here on public television. The technical people can dispute this in finance. They know about the loans that we have contracted. So on Amelia, it's good for Ghana. We're not going to allow these naysayers. They were never pleased with anything. As we discussed the last time, they were not pleased with the Hope Canal. They were not pleased with the Berbice Bridge. They were not pleased with the new airport. They were not pleased with the Marriott. They were not pleased with the stadium. They were not pleased with the convention center. You remember, they were all opposed to many of these things. They will continue to be opposed to these things, but what do? We made a pledge to the people of this country, and we intend to keep that pledge, which is reliable, cheap power. And we're forging ahead with this.
Dr. Jagdeo, one of the things being touted now by the opposition, it seems that they pulled conveniently from a USAID report speaking to shared governance. And the opposition seems to have gotten a change of heart and have an interest in shared governance, sending mixed signals about shared governance, and specifically extracting parts of that report that would suggest the Americans are pushing for shared governance.
Yes.
Have you seen that report, and can you speak to that and what exactly the opposition is saying?
Now, the USAID report is not saying anything that we have not said publicly about inclusive governance. We in the People's Progressive Party have been talking about this. We have lived this. We passed a constitution that promoted inclusive governance through its features. When the parliament was structured very differently at the level of the legislature, we changed that. You'd recall we put in place the 5 Rights Commission, and how you get to sit on one of those commissions. You have to have 2/3 support from the National Assembly. No single party can decide unilaterally who will sit on the 5 Rights Commission. We passed a procurement commission that, again, the 2 parties the political parties in parliament, or the government and opposition, had to agree to its membership. We put in the constitution 4 standing committees of the parliament, 2 chaired by the government, 2 chaired by the opposition, and then rotated. That was not there before. That includes the opposition in government, at least at the legislative level, to have a say in the management of the country. At the level of the Parliamentary Management Committee, before we made the changes and I signed the new constitution into law, the government decided the parliamentary agenda. Now what happens is that there is a committee, the Parliamentary Management Committee, with equal numbers on both sides, 5 each, and it's chaired by the Speaker. I can go through a long list of other measures that we included in the Constitution to promote inclusive government. That is at that level, to give a greater voice to the opposition. We even, in our last manifesto in 2020, there are 2 things that we said: that we'd have national consultations that we're committed to on a constitutional reform. If the people of this country want power sharing, then we are prepared to discuss it. And because we said we want to search for a model for greater inclusive governance. And that's part of our manifesto. So I'm sure if USAID read our manifesto, they were just repeating what we have in our manifesto, that constitutional reform to look at our governance model. And secondly, to look at also at management of electoral systems. Those were the two major things that we promised, but more so on the governance model. So I don't see anything strange. President Biden calls for inclusive governance, and this is generally the case. We said that before. The US government is not offending us or directing us for doing something that we've already called for generally. We have made it clear. I sat here right with you long before the USAID report or any other report and said that if APNU wants to engage seriously, they have to move away from racism and they have to commit to democracy, because that party has a major problem with democracy. It grew up on a history of stealing elections, and then they tried to do that again. And they're still not committed, I believe, to a democratic country. They would speak the rhetoric of democracy. Today's newspaper, I looked at it, and a former AFC member, a senior member from Essequibo, pointed out how the AFC was duped, and that said that the PNC never had any commitment in the coalition to democracy, how they were sidelined, and that they were willingly sidelined because the leaders of the AFC were in bed and were looking at mainly their own perks, bangles and all kinds of properties and stuff like that. That was what. There is no commitment to democracy, and they're still very racist. Very, very racist. Every day, that's all they talk about, racism. I saw a program with David Hines and some of the leaders of that party talking about the $250,000 that we gave the sugar workers, for after who were laid off. And they never would for a moment have the decency to say, when I was president too, that when the bauxite workers were laid off, that APNU ran the bauxite industry to the ground, that we gave the workers almost twice as much as their severance pay. But the collective bargaining agreement determined that they should get. They never would say that. They would complain about that. These were the same people boasting that public servants got 75% increase since they came into office. And the sugar workers in the 5 years who were toiling in the fields got zero in every one of those 5 years. Not a single salary increase in 5 years. It's jaundice. How could you sit there? They look at per capita every year. We probably give about over 100,000 to every man, woman, and child living in region 10 just for electricity subsidy, which no other part of this country gets. And that has happened in the last 25 years. But they would not look at that. It's always about racism. And when Indo-Guyanese or Amerindian are involved, a racist party at the core. So talk about inclusivity and inclusive government. You can't include in government people who are not committed to a national movement for all of our people, to which we are committed and our policies reflect that. And secondly, who don't believe in democracy. So this all is rhetorical call about inclusive government. And I noticed the people who, in any case, the USAID report, apart from reflecting what we said, what we've been saying all along, spoke with 22 civil society organizations. And you know what would happen. The McCormacks and the others will give their jaundiced view of the PPP again. So that is where when they interview these so-called civil society organizations, but many of them are aligned to APNU, they will come up with these views. We are committed to a free, inclusive country, and so we have no problem with that call.
Dr. Jagdeo, I made note here of a sentiment being expressed.
But by the way, the same, you said conveniently, the USAID report, conveniently they forgot the part that talk about the attempt to steal the election by APNU in the 2020 elections, and that this is a legitimate government. They forgot to speak about that or highlight that bit.
In the same report?
In the same report. In the same report.
Conveniently. So today, a press conference held by the comrade leader of the PNCR, they were echoing sentiments which are not of, at least not from my experience of the PNCR, people-centered economic philosophy. Can you give your take on this?
Can you just do something for me? And I want all of the APNU supporters out there to do one thing for me. Check the 2015 manifesto of the PNC. They said in the first 100 days they would double old age pension. What happened? They took away the water subsidy from the pensioners in this country. Water subsidy. They didn't double it by any standard. We said we will double old age pension in the 5 years period. We've already increased in the first 2 years the pension by 40%. And we plan to double it before we contest the next election again. We believe in our promise. How could you be people-centered and take away the $10,000 grant that the school children had? Now it's $25,000. It was zero when APNU came into office, $25,000 per school child, in public and private sector. How could you be people-centered and increase all nearly 200 taxes and fees, from VAT on data, on electricity, on water, on basic medicines? This is unbelievable. The people-centered party that he's talking about. We've removed all those taxes so that there's less of a burden. Of course, I acknowledge that the prices have increased because of the global pandemic and the supply chain problems that we have. But people, it shows the intention of the government. So how could you be people? Now he wants to remove income tax. And I saw people-centered economic philosophy. That's not an economic philosophy that he's talking about. So suddenly he goes off to Linden and say the government is giving all money to everybody, but you're not getting any money. We have not spent a cent of the oil money as yet. We just passed a budget in which some of the oil resources will come to the budget. But the transfer has not taken place as yet. We haven't spent a cent of oil money as yet, as of this point in time. But he's already gone to Linden to lie to people to say they're excluded from receiving oil money. And what are we spending the money on? We can't eat up every cent. So he doesn't have an economic philosophy. Read the statement carefully that he made today. He doesn't talk about creating wealth, expanding the economy, generating employment. He talks about welfare all the time. Share out all the money we have. So what happens when the oil goes? And now in the era of climate change and net zero, it could go faster than normal. What happens? Not a single word about economic expansion, building infrastructure, economic policies, creating a diversified economy. generating wealth for people at every levels in our society. All he says, oh, I want, if the government in waiting, well, he'll grow old waiting. He'll grow very old waiting, because they're not getting, with that nonsense, they can't get back into power with the bilge that he was talking about. Today, he says, oh, I want to remove income tax. So how are we going to fund all of these activities? We still run a fiscal deficit. We have to borrow to spend now, up to now. We still run a fiscal deficit, although we got out of the big burdensome debt that they had left us with when we just assumed office. Clearly, Norton doesn't understand anything about economics. He's saying the things that people want to hear. Oh, I don't have to pay taxes, and they're happy about that. You know, and it sounds good politically. But you don't run a country like that. If you hand over a country, you saw what happened. They didn't do anything, not on power, not on anything. Expand the infrastructure, the economy. 30,000, 40,000 people lost their jobs even before the pandemic on the avenue. This is, if you hand the country to them, we run down, we become poorer than most countries in the hemisphere after 5 years, and spend every single cent without any regard to future planning or thinking long term about expanding welfare in the long run and expanding health, economic well-being.
Dr. Jagdeo, one of the questions that are in people's mind, and just steering away a little bit from the opposition, because at times listening to them and their issues can become intoxicating and even confusing, but in more holding this government accountable, the PPP administration of the past spent a huge sum of money on creating a packaging plant at Enmore. It's since now gone into a public-private arrangement that sees taxpayers' money being put towards an arrangement with a private company. Can you explain to the Guyanese citizens, the citizenry, as to what is the logic behind that, and how can we feel secure that the government has made a right decision on the people's behalf?
Yes, so this is an important issue. I've seen a lot of newspaper articles about this matter. And so a year ago, we made a commitment to the sugar workers that we will reopen the estates. We could not reopen Wales because they had sold out the equipment, dismantled the factory.
When you say they, you mean the previous
administration.
Yes.
They unilaterally shut down these estates, sent home 7,000 people without regard for their future, and didn't even want to pay them their severance. So at Wales, we had to go estate by estate. At Wales, we said we are going to ensure that when we looked at the two sites, basically, Berbice and the north of the bridge and Wales, we studied two sites that for the gas power plant and the facilities surrounding that. We opted for Wales for a number of reasons. I'm not going to go through all the reasons, but it was economically more feasible to do that. So we said, if we develop Wales with the power plant, a protein, maybe using the gas for industrialization in that area. So it's only the first 50 million cubic that we'd have to use, we'd get in the first wave of the project that will generate power and probably do maybe a protein plant, maybe basalt fiber, small fertilizer plant. But we have 80 million cubic more coming per day. That's cubic feet of gas. So that could facilitate an industrialization in that whole area. With the next shore-based facility being on the other side of the river that Exxon is deciding now, that will generate thousands of jobs. This facility at Wales, with the development and the support services, will generate thousands of jobs. So we can observe a lot of the unemployment in West Coast in these facilities, the industrialization of the West Bank. So we couldn't go back to reopen the sugar estate, but we made alternate use for the land.
Just to make sure I have you clear, Dr. Jagdeo, and it is very clear for the layman, because the opposition from time to time takes information, and not only the opposition, members of society take the information and distort the facts. Now, in the PPP's manifesto, there was a promise to open the sugar estates.
Yes.
In assessing the sugar estates, the PPP or this government realized that certain things could not have been done as promised.
Yes.
But things are being put in place to ensure that jobs are created.
Yes. So I'm coming to that because we believe in studying things, making the economically rational decisions. It must be reasoned. And that's what I'm going through with you, like at Wales. So it was almost impossible. The factory had been dismantled. So we are making plans now to generate employment on Wales that can absorb not just the displaced sugar workers, but tens of thousands of people. And with the bridge being built and the 12 lanes from the East Coast and Georgetown going to connect with the bridge and the East Bank, that will generate a lot of employment in both banks, sides of the river, in regions 4 and 3, the thousands of new jobs. So we went to Enmore. Enmore, all the lands had been practically, the fields were left without cultivation. And so what was operational at Enmore was the packaging plant. And they used to bring the sugar from Berbice now because we're not producing sugar in Demerara anymore. And you bring it from Berbice to be packaged here, some of the sugar. Some was being packaged at Blairmont. You can package at 2 places. So we had about 200 persons working in the packaging plant. And we lost about another maybe 600-700 jobs from the closure of the estate. So just maybe under 1,000 persons. So we're thinking, how is it? We did a survey, we asked people. People said, we're not particularly wedded to sugar, but we need employment. We met with a lot of the sugar workers. So we are now working on several facilities now. So first of all, starting very soon, there is another, we've allocated about a 10-acre plot for development here that will generate between 500 to 700 jobs maybe in the Enmore area, and the area close to the estate. That's just land. Then this opportunity, so before that, so what we decided last year, that since it's costly to move the sugar down and then package, double handling, that we should move this packaging plant, that's the equipment within the shell, to Albion and build a facility at Albion, since most of our sugar is being produced at Albion and we're reopening Rose Hall. So we're thinking about reopening Rose Hall, but that was the decision that was made, to move the packaging plant out of Enmore into Albion. So now that process is ongoing. There are 2 lines that we use now. So one line would be added to the packaging line at Blairmont, and another would go to Albion, and we will probably expand the packaging at Albion. So that will leave now the shell that we built at Enmore empty. So the arrangement is that we lease this, but in exchange you have the jobs maintained, and they ultimately go up to maybe 800-900 persons employed there, and at a high-end machining skills for the oil and gas industry. So that can take care of a lot of the employment from displaced sugar workers, but from others in the area, between just these two facilities at Enmore. Thirdly, in the budget, we have money to build an industrial estate at the back of the Falls area, Enmore Falls area, that could accommodate people all the way from Buxton, maybe Shras Bay, Enterprise, who were displaced from the sugar industry, because it's not just people from Enmore who were displaced. So these three initiatives alone will generate, we believe, close to 4,000 jobs on the East Coast. And East Coast, also on the East Coast, many people come to Georgetown and there are more opportunities here. So that is what we intended to do at Enmore to generate employment, a studied look. We reopened Wales to Rose Hall to some extent. Well, Blaymont was functioning. We plan to upgrade Blaymont. At Skeldon, we are looking at diversifying. So we have had several proposals now to do electricity from the cogeneration. We're thinking about some of the hemp, using the hemp legislation to convert some of the land into hemp, aquaculture, going back into sugar a bit, but as maybe in a smaller scale, so we can generate a series of employment opportunities at Skeldon for people who are displaced from the sugar industry. So we are looking at it in many ways, in a more studied way. We're discussing about strengthening management. So imagine APNU has this concern for sugar workers and sugar assets now, and all of these naysayers. When APNU took all of Gaisuko's assets and then left all the liabilities in Gaisuko and transferred all the assets to NISIL. And then NISIL started giving out, all the Wales land were given out. The properties, those houses at Wales were given out to people. In Enmore, all the managers' houses and stuff are leased out. You find out from who? Many of them cronies of APNU. You should go through the list. In Rose Hall, they were selling out all the equipment for pittance. Functioning articulated tractors were selling for 100,000. They were selling them for 100,000, stripping the assets there. When they sold out all of the Gaisuko assets at Wales through to the scrap metal people for a pittance and a deal that was not publicly tendered. Where were these people who were so concerned about Gaisuko's assets being given up? The rape of the assets, and now suddenly they surface. Again, they're worried about the bond that will remain there, that we're trying to get somebody to go in. But this will not be new. We built a building in Linden, and we're practically giving the building for free in exchange for a person to operate a call center that will generate 200 jobs. It's not unique. It is a model that we made public that we want to do in Essequibo Coast, that we build the shells so that we can co-invest with people to generate jobs in the outlying regions, because it's harder to get jobs for our people there than in regions 3 and 4, because here you have more dynamism because of the oil and gas sector until we can find jobs in these areas. It's not a model that we've been shy about talking about. And we have no apology for trying to generate more employment for people. But suddenly, the conscience of our society, they have to speak out. But they were quiet when APNU was just stripping Gaisuko's assets and selling it to everybody.
Dr. Jagdeo, on the point of Linden, you said they're building a facility there.
Yeah, it was
with the
built.
hope of
Yes.
having, will the business community in Linden have the first opportunity, or because most likely
For a call center,
for a call
if
center.
you need people who have connections with a call center, we have to get the jobs. Whether the jobs come from people from Linden or not, if an investor brings in and generates jobs for 200 persons, we don't care.
but the jobs are created for
The jobs are
Lindeners.
created for Lindeners. The jobs are created for Lindeners. We got to do that. And this is not new. When I was president, we built a facility of a similar nature. We had 88 persons working there in 2015. APNU came in and shut down that facility. All those people lost their jobs. All those people lost their jobs. This is not anything new. The people of Linden, I see Norton going there and walking around and sharing out these little flyers, lying to people. And they should really, Lindeners should really question, what have they ever done except make false promises to them over and over and over again? I can point to things that we have done in that community. They can't, except preach racism.
I think I have covered most of the concerns that have been brought to my attention by citizens. And because of our constant interaction, Dr. Jagdeo, I must tell you, a lot of my questions also come from a wide cross section of opposition supporters
Yes.
who have, to some extent, become, disillusioned with them because of their experience of the last 5 years of
Yes.
PNC rule. And those people constantly want to be reassured. How will they be taken care of? They're not adequately represented by the opposition because of their modus operandi. Can you, in us closing, reach out again and let the opposition supporters know what to expect from a One Guyana government?
Well, whether the opposition represents them or not, this is a government for all the people. And in our planning process, in our allocation of funds, the children of Guyana are important to us. All of our people, every single one, regardless of who they voted for. So they can rest assured that they will not be excluded from the planning process, nor the allocations to ensure that they receive equal benefits as every other Guyanese. They are part of this future that will be good for all of our people. And so for me, I can understand maybe people are feeling insecure because of what they've heard. And so we need to reassure them all the time. But they can have access to us, and they have to understand that we probably care more in a real way about their concerns than they would ever get from APNU. And because of the nature of our party, we promote a lot of business development, but largely we are pro-private sector, largely because we believe you have to expand the cake to divide it and to get each person a bigger share. You can't just say, oh, let's distribute what's there, and when it's done, you don't have anything to distribute. That's the philosophy of APNU. And so we are pro-private sector, but you look at our social agenda. We're now working on building, in our planning process, 7 new hospitals starting this year. 7 new major hospitals starting this year. We're going to upgrade New Amsterdam. We're going to upgrade Linden, upgrading Bartica. We're upgrading West Demerara. We're planning now for 4 major diagnostic centers in each of the 4 hinterland regions so that we can do telemedicine. The best specialists in the world can see people virtually or read their tests virtually in these areas. That's part of the planning we're starting this year. The Gold Scholarship, you see it. Tens of thousands of Ghanaians will now be able to get a tertiary education for free because of this government of every race. We never question which party did you vote for. Ask anyone who applied for the Gold Scholarship whether we ask them how they voted in 2020. You never have that under us because we believe in working for all of Guyana. But one thing we will not do is to allow APNU through reverse psychology, and because they talk about racism all the time, to not treat people who supported us fairly too. That is what I think they want to do that all the time. And a lot of the so-called NGOs, it's a veiled kind of racism that they practice. Look at the typical thing at the EPA. Now, the guy who heads the EPA, never a member of the PPP. I know the PPP members. He's a professional who practically spent all his life in the EPA. But he is not trusted. Vincent Alexander, who is an executive member of the AFC, went through a sham process and got the job there. He is seen as, we replaced a good man with a party person. It's not true. Is it because he's Indian, he can't be objective, or he has to be PPP? It's not PPP. I see that all the time, and then Vincent Adams lies through his teeth. Like he said, Exxon promised him 2.5 billion. They took him up the mountain and whisper in his ears the 2.5 billion, because if they did that, and I'm glad if he could come up with that they actually did that, because then we can say to them, you have to build on the 2.5 billion. But you must have some document, and he signed off the LISA 2 permit and didn't put that in. When we sign off on the Payara permit, we added 4 things that he didn't have. We put in a tax, a no flaring policy, and a tax on emissions. Secondly, we got them to commit to a cradle-to-grave management of waste. Thirdly, we improved the standard for spill management. And fourthly, we ensure that water had to be treated, wastewater, to international standard before being discharged. All of those are improvements. He gave away basically the baby and everything else out the window to Exxon with those 2 permits that he approved. Now he says, they had promised him. Why did he put it in the environmental permit? We don't have any records of that. But he lies, and then he gets the front page of a newspaper that takes this lie as gospel. And then we have to spend valuable time rebutting a lie. Every day it saps the energy when Ashley saying now has to go and respond to lies all the time by a bunch of people who have nothing to do every day but except complain.
Dr. Jagdeo, since we're on ExxonMobil, a question might have slipped me. There's a bit of debacle in the public domain about insurances as it results to oil spill. Is the government satisfied as to where we are? Can you explain that?
And I saw they said that because I said there would be no insurance, I said that is the subject of discussion as part of the permitting for the Yellowtail project now. That is what I said, that is part of the discussion for the environmental permit to see that we get greater assurances, progressively greater assurances and insurance to cater for a spill should it happen, not that we are hoping it would happen. So that's what I said, and that will be part of the discussion. And when we approve the environmental permit, they will see a full explanation on that. I said that's part of the conversation now.
As it relates to new oil contracts, Dr. Jagdeo, are we going to be seeing, because much has been said, and even international organizations, different countries have been expressing sentiments about the hand that we have been dealt.
Yes.
As much as not was not done by this administration, it was done by an administration of the past. Nonetheless, everyone has accepted we have been dealt an unfair hand. How does your administration, the Ali administration, look at new oil contracts?
Yes, but I made it clear at the oil and gas conference and before at press conferences, our position is not a secret one. We said before the elections, we will not renegotiate the contract, but we will seek to get more benefits to Ghana, utilizing the laws of this country and through the energy project. The first thing is that we passed the local content legislation to force more the oil companies to buy goods and services directly from our people, more benefits. That was not there before. APNU didn't do it, although there was lobbying. There was none of that. Now we have a law with penalties. If you don't do it, you have penalties. They force them. Secondly, the gas to energy project. That was a bellwether. Cheaper electricity, cheap gas, because the contract that they agreed to, it's the gas price is there and it's close to world market price, which is high. That price will not be part of the high price will not be part of the supply of the first 50 million.
To some extent, renegotiation has happened.
Yes, so we are getting more benefits. We're getting more benefits without having to formally be engaged in a dispute because the last government signed it. And that's the sanctity of contracts that we have to have. And so it is such a disgusting thing to see Patterson say they now support renegotiation. And as I said before, in the contract, the local office for Exxon was the law office of Nigel Hughes, who was at that time the chairman of, I think, their party, AFC, and his wife was a member of the cabinet. And then the other person who signed the contract was Trotman. He was a executive member of the AFC. Now, for Patterson to now come and say they support renegotiation, they were the ones who rushed, contrary to advice, into signing the contract immediately. That and they support they don't agree with the 2%. They were the ones who signed on to that. So it's all very convenient. One thing about us, we're not convenient. We could have easily said before the elections, because it's very, fashionable to say, oh, we'll renegotiate the contract. If we win power, we'll renegotiate the contract and we'll get more for Ghanaians and get people support you. We knew we were going to win the elections. We took a position that where we'd have some credibility and integrity. We said we will not renegotiate, but this is how we'll go. We also said in opposition, and we put it in our manifesto, that no future contract or no future company will benefit from the same conditions. So I said that to Exxon. If Exxon were to develop the Kaichoro Kanchi blocks, they will not get the same PSA that they got under the Stabroek block. It will be totally different. And I outlined at the press conference, not the press conference, but the energy conference, the principles that we use in crafting the new PSA. That's one. So if CGX were to come now along and go to that, they would have faced a different environment, totally different position.
Dr. Jagdeo, I know you're busy and you've taken time out from your busy schedule and moving this country forward to do this interview. I want to thank you and your government for the transparency and the ability to, bring in layman terms, facts to the Guyanese citizenry.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping we can do this
Yeah,
as
sure.
usual, just to have the Guyanese citizen understand
Yeah, sure.
what and where Guyana is going and when.
Yeah, sure.
Viewers, thank you.